like talking about Buddha nature, it's actually just a way of describing us becoming ourselves. Like me becoming the version of me who doesn't have any traumas or fixations or preconceived ideas about good and bad. Just like the most authentic, genuine, pure, loving self that you can be. But the thing is that as long as you have even the tiniest trace of confusion and karmas left in your system, that's not it. You still need to work through those. You're still as screwed as you were.
Hello and welcome to the Lion Face Guru podcast. I'm Chris, and this is another in a series of interviews with the Mahasiddhas of Amrita Mandala Sangha, those who have reached first stage of Buddhahood, the complete realization of emptiness. They have purified all karmas of the mind. They have attained perfect wakefulness for the sake of all beings. And I'm glad to be introducing today's guest, which is Helena Ahlbäck from Finland. In this interview, Helena describes her experience of her journey along the path, from initial awakening back in early 2015, all the way through to first stage of Buddhahood. She describes how she managed to fit her practice in, despite being a busy mother and a full-time worker, as well as the many difficulties and obstacles that she faced along the way. Not only how she managed to find time to do her formal practice, but how she managed to integrate her practice with her daily life. And importantly, she goes on to describe, after a period of stagnation in her practice, how connecting with Bodhicitta, the heart-mind of enlightenment, the wish to practice and attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings, was so pivotal and essential to her progress along the path. And as she talks about the latter stages of her practice, she goes on to describe how she experienced longer and longer durations of cessations, which are temporary glimpses into one's own Buddha nature, when all selfing ceases temporarily. And of course, the moment of her final cessation, this irreversible insight into the complete realization of the empty nature of all phenomena, which happened over a year ago now, back in October 2021. Helena goes on to describe how her practice is now, how it is different to how it was before, as she continues to progress towards this supposed final attainment known as full rainbow body. So far, it is interesting to note that there are more women in our Sangha who have reached this final realization of emptiness. And I think Helena's journey is testament to the feminine principle of wisdom, as I feel she is someone who truly embodies the qualities of openness, devotion, surrender, and faith. Helena has taught me a lot in this regard, as I know from experience that without these qualities, the path becomes very dry, even torturous and impossible. In this interview, we talk a lot about the stages of awakening, the supposed opening and perfections of Bhumis. These are part of our path map, the 13 Bhumi model. So if you want to find out a little more about what we're talking about, you can have a look at amritamandala.com in the teaching section where the 13 Bhumi model is described, or I give a brief description in Robert Anderson's interview in the introduction. So finally, if you're seeing the benefits in these interviews and you think they might be useful to others, please consider liking, subscribing and sharing. Thank you. So Helena is from Finland and is currently stuck in a snowstorm at the moment at her... You're staying at your parents' house, right?
Yes. I was supposed to drive back home already yesterday, but there's so much snow that has fallen down, so my plans changed and I'm stuck here for a day.
So you had your shrine ready and you had your robes ready, but you've got your mala.
They're all at home. Yes, I have my mala. Yes, unfortunately not my robe. It's at home, so I couldn't wear it for the interview.
So Helena's actually someone who I've probably followed the closest in her journey. She wrote a very detailed journal in the Sangha, so it was quite easy to follow along. And by the time I had joined in, she was well at the forefront of everyone in the Sangha, and it was all quite amazing to me, her progress that she was making. And some of the insights that she was coming to. She was such a sensitive person to the energies and clearly such a heartfelt person. It was a long time until I actually met Helena in person at the retreat when I came over to visit at Porvoo. Helena started her journey in 2015. You awoke with the two-part formula. So maybe we'll start there about what brought you to the spiritual path in the first place. What sort of encouraged you in that direction? What was this existential pang that led you to the spiritual path? But what was it that opened you to the two-part formula in the first place? Because I think that was it was just before coming across that was your entry point, wasn't it? You actually went to one of Baba's teachings in the early days. So do you want to describe that?
Yeah, it was actually so that if we start kind of from the beginning, the kind of existential pain, and I never felt it as existential pain, but I felt like there was something in the world around me that was off. That I couldn't place my finger on what it was, but there was just like this nagging sensation of things that somehow things don't, even if kind of things function, they don't make sense on a deeper level. But I couldn't kind of get my head around what it was or how it should be otherwise, other than I couldn't actually believe that what we do and how we look at things and our surroundings, that life would be just that. I couldn't find that kind of compromise in myself to believe that that's everything that life has to offer, that there has to be something more, something deeper, something that would make sense, because I didn't feel like the world as we live it didn't make fully sense. Like people being irrational and acting out from pain, and that was just, there was some, I kind of felt like I was looking for something, but I didn't know what it was. That all I remember quite clearly, those thoughts already from my teenage years, that there was this sense of things being off. And I remember my mom told me that it was winter. I was 2 years old, and so this was then quite early 80s, and there were no street lights and anything, so it was pitch black, it was pitch dark in the middle of the night when I woke up. And I was looking around, and then I woke my mom up and asked her that, is this what death is like?
Yeah.
So, and I think that was something quite, so there was like, I've always had this kind of feeling that there's just something more. And well, then I started university, and I threw myself into partying and kind of traveling and everything. So I was looking at the solution from like outside myself, and experiencing things and doing things, sometimes sensible and sometimes not that sensible things, and just kind of throwing myself into something and then jumping to the next thing and the following thing. So I was kind of constantly on the move in a way. There was a lot of searching, but aimless searching. There was no focus, just kind of this mishmash of ideas, what might make me happy. Still like this, somehow like a hollowness or something that really didn't get fulfilled. The yoga fair that you mentioned, where Baba was giving a lecture on the two-part formula, I actually wanted to attend, but I wasn't able to with two small kids at home. So I never got to that far, but that was something that really kind of, there was this, it was like a magnet kind of pulling me in, like this quite strong appeal in that. that was actually quite strange because, first of all, I didn't know what awakening was. I wasn't familiar with the concept of having a self that you identify with and that you could awaken from it and see that it's just an illusion.
Yeah.
But I knew that would kind of bring, I knew there would be like some kind of shift and it would be irreversible. And I kind of pondered for quite a long time that I couldn't decide if that was a good thing or a bad thing.
All right.
I just knew, yeah. So I knew I was going to, but that's the thing that my philosophy has always been that I'm going to regret the things that I leave undone and not that I'm not doing instead of regretting that I did something and then it didn't turn out as I thought. So then I thought that, okay, I'll send him an email and ask for a guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that, and he replied. And then I had to politely ask that, so can you tell me what's the idea with this? That I want to do it, but I really don't know what I'm getting into.
Had you done any meditative practice or had a spiritual practice? You hadn't had much of one up to this point, right?
Not at all. No, not much at all. No, well, nothing that you could actually describe as a meditative practice. I did some guided meditations on YouTube, and was listening to some regressions and that kind of just like picking something that felt interesting here and there, but I never had like a formal sitting practice or anything like that.
So you're fresh into it, and you're going with your intuition at this point.
Totally, and that's been kind of my guiding light the whole way. I mean, always kind of feeling, and if the intuition has like that pull towards something or not. And this clearly had. So I sent the email, he explained the concept, and that was on a Wednesday in 2015 in February. And by Friday afternoon, shortly after lunch, I was writing my kind of one of the emails that we were sending back and forth at work. And I had just sat eating lunch and kind of trying to find the open space. And then I was typing down my experiences. And then suddenly it felt like a whole body band-aid was ripped off.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't breathe. It felt like I could actually for the first time breathe.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it's so obvious. How don't we know? Like no trumpets or fanfares or anything, but just like this really ordinary, like being without, suddenly like there was like no friction. Like there was just like an expansiveness that felt so natural. And I was like, oh, how didn't I figure this out on my own? So, I mean, so in a sense, I stumbled accidentally into the Dharma path.
For me, I'd been on the spiritual path for 7 years, diligently meditating every day. When I started, it took me 6 or 7 weeks, and for you, it took 2 days. And but
it took me 2.5 days.
That's what I was trying to remember. You said it. There was this release, and all of a sudden you felt you could breathe for the first time in your life. I seem to remember reading this somewhere.
Yeah, and kind of a really kind of naturalness. Something that was artificial finally like dropped away. That I used to cling on to quite. I never had like a strong sense of self. I never was like super kind of tight in that sense. But there was still like a sense that I'd been clinging on to something, and that was gone. And it was kind of like the first experience of the mind recognizing its its naturalness, its natural way of being, the awakening. But it's quite interesting. I mean, that it's in everybody, that simple way of being without friction and without the constricting feeling of self. So yeah, you would actually, or I would hope that more people would find it, the tools to kind of do it for themselves and
Hope
see
so.
that it's possible.
Yeah. So your next Bhumi took over a year.
Yes.
To open your a year and 3 months. What happened, Helena?
So my first idea when I did the guidance was just like to test it out. So I was never actually set on starting a meditation practice. Then I thought that, but it could be quite interesting just to see what it brings, because like the first Bhumi opening, the first shift in the mind was such a profound experience that I thought that, well, I can give it a go. I mean, it was purely on self-based reasons to kind of see if, and out of curiosity as well. So I wasn't trying to end my existential suffering or anything. The goal wasn't clear for me why I was practicing. So I did it every now and then. And I had small kids, so I was tired, so I hardly sat in the mornings, and I was way too tired after work to sit after then in the evening. And if I did sit, I was too energized to sleep. So yeah, I was just like all over the place in the beginning.
So it sounds like you weren't really a seeker yet at this point.
I was a seeker in a sense that I was looking for something, but I didn't know that meditation and spirituality and Dharma was actually the key to that would unlock or to be the solution for the searching. I hadn't had that insight yet at that point.
Yeah. And then you described, thinking back to your journal that you wrote, did you go through a bit of a burnout? Was it around this sort of time? It sounded like you were very overloaded with work. And I wrote down a phrase that you wrote, bottom of 100-meter deep, dark well. So
yes.
Things got a bit existential for you.
Yes. Oh, yes, that was a quite rough time, having a long commute, financially a tricky time at work, 2 small kids at home. So there was a lot of things going on at the time in my life. And I noticed when I was practicing and attending retreats that there was a really, really big relief for me. So I kind of had that kind of safe space, in a sense, like my own bubble that I could go back into, and where things were calm, and the pressure from the outside world wasn't weighing me down, and the kids weren't tugging me in the sleeve and saying mom, 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 mom. And where I could just be and kind of just like kind of relax and be present and have that, finally, that calmness that wasn't there in my everyday life. So it became almost, I mean, I say hiding place because I was using it for avoidance. I wasn't confronting my circumstances, but I was using it as a getaway from my life circumstances. So I kind of took on the victim role, that because I have such a busy schedule, I don't have enough time to practice, and I have small kids, I don't have enough time to practice, and there are just like all these adverse circumstances in my life that makes it impossible for me to practice, which actually isn't true. But I kind of fell into this thought pattern about like this victimizing, that because of all different kinds of things I can't practice properly. I remember once, I don't remember on which what year it was, but I'd been on a weekend retreat from Friday afternoon to Sunday, And I got back home, and of course, when I'd been away for 2.5 days, the kids were like all over me when I got back home, which was really, really nice. And then we sat down on the sofa, and when the kids have missed you, they start to argue and bicker and cry and get into an argument, either the kids among them or then with me or something. And I remember like I was sitting on the sofa, and I tucked my knees under my chin, and I just like sat there like, no, don't disturb my bubble, I'm feeling so good. No, just like
Oh
this
dear.
complete avoidance, like complete bypassing of everything. But that's kind of part of the journey as well. So
Your path was quite steady through the first 6 or 7 Bhumis over the next year and a half or so.
yeah.
I just want to try and have a bit of a history lesson here, going back to the early days, because this was still when people didn't understand about perfections. Opening 6th Bhumi was a big thing back in those days.
Yes.
I just wondered what it was actually like. The whole Sangha was still on a discovery at the time of this. What happened at 6th Bhumi and the different goalposts that we were noticing along the way.
Yeah, I think it was actually quite an interesting time in a way, because we were, and especially Baba was mapping the terrain. I remember a retreat for advanced practitioners was a retreat for those who had opened 6 Bhumis open. So
Yeah.
I mean, we have like the 1st to the 13th, and the karmic traces in the like 1 to 10, and we didn't know about the whole system. So about first opening all the Bhumis, and then perfecting them. So now we have those who have full emptiness realization, quite many as well in the Sangha, but we didn't have any with 10 open, or Mahasiddha, the 11, 12, and 13 Bhumis open. So I mean, you knew the process worked, and you were progressing. So there was no reason to doubt or reason to think that it wouldn't carry further.
Yeah.
And I remember my first retreat that I went to, and we did Guru Yoga, which is a cornerstone in the Amrita Mandala practices, and we did Guru Yoga with Machi Glabdron, and we were visualizing ourselves as her, like physical appearance and long hair and jewelry and like a feminine form, and like bracelets and everything. And then the pointer that Baba gave was also think and visualize your nails as these long nails. And that's when it hit me like, whoa, like a monsoon rain, the charge. Yeah, and I was like, what happened? And I was kind of just like looking around myself, like inside my mind, that what's going on. And then when I got home, I realized that it actually felt like home, the feeling, that kind of the feeling when you get after a long day, when you could just like sit back and relax and just like become like everything in your body, all tensions just like melt away, and you feel just like, I'm home, I'm safe, there's nothing that's going to bother me. I was like, oh my God, that's the experience that I had. I was like, okay, so now I'm definitely hooked.
Oh wow, yeah. That
Yeah.
sounds like something that would really increase your confidence that this is actually a genuine path.
Yeah.
For me, I find this fascinating because as I look back into the past and all of you guys working together through these early days, I think I would have struggled back in those days, because I think my confidence that I was actually improving was very difficult for me. And I think if I was in those early days, I would have thought, well, I hardly feel like I'm getting anywhere. But your sensitivity, and I think you being able to follow your heart, feels like a really a reason for your devotion to the practice?
Yeah, I would say it played quite a big role in kind of finding that confidence inside
Mm-hmm.
to the confidence to kind of believe, not believe, but to know your own progress. It's not just about opening the Bhumis, but the thing is that it has an effect on your everyday life. So you don't have as much friction with the people around you because you're not reacting in the same self-based way. And you notice, I remember a discussion with one of my colleagues where I knew my normal like behavioral patterns, and then I had the discussion, and then I was afterwards like, oh my god, what just happened? That wasn't how I usually do it. That went much smoother. Kind of, you have those loops that you're stuck in where you do the same thing over and over again, and then you suddenly notice that I'm not reacting the same way anymore.
Mm.
And then you have another thing, and then you just notice that like this, in small steps your life is actually becoming easier and easier and easier because you're progressing, you're less attached. Well, that the kind of solid self experience that was gone with the first Bhumi, and
Mm-hmm.
after that you target the self-based emotions that you have with feelings, like
Mm.
anger, sadness, that somebody's doing wrong to me and that was unfair, and like all those kind of constricting things are then kind of associated with the following insight levels, and seeing through them as empty as well. So it's not just like a technical process that open a Bhumi and then the following one and then the following one, but it actually carries a huge impact on your everyday life. And it just, everything becomes easier because you don't have that, or well, it's a bit early to say you don't have the constricting feeling, but it becomes lesser and lesser and smaller and smaller and finer and finer.
Mm.
So it's not, you're not chopping wood with an axe, but or in the beginning it feels that you're swinging an axe and then maybe just a hammer and then maybe just a knife, then in the end maybe just a needle, kind of. So the effect of the emotion, that you don't get caught up in them because they become paler and they become fainter, and there's more space around everything. You still have emotions, but the thing is that they're not constricting as they were before, and that makes life much easier.
So on this retreat you went to, there's an important moment that happened for you. You talked about seeing the Kashyapa relic, and you were on sixth Bhumi, I think, on sixth Bhumi opening, and you came across the Kashyapa relic, and you wanted to ask a question or make in some sense a vow. You decided it needed to be an important vow. Do you remember this moment?
Yes, yeah, we had a refuge ceremony, and Baba had brought his relic. Is it called rinsel, like the tiny bead of Buddha Kashyapa? And he said that we could sit with it and feel the charge, and if we wanted we could make a request. And I was sitting there, I was one of the first ones, and so there was like a whole, all the other attendants were sitting, or attendings were sitting behind me, and I couldn't come up with anything that I felt was, let's say, big or somehow effectful enough. And then Baba signaled to me like kind of that, okay, your time is running out. I was like, I really want to request something, but I don't know what, and my time is running out. And then I was like, okay, now I know. So I was like, okay, I wish or that my sincere wish is that we can spread the Dharma and for people to find the relief for their existential suffering, and that the Sangha will grow, and that we will have many practitioners, and we can help even more people that way in those lines. And I was like, okay, that's a good one. And I was like, and I mean, I'm talking about it in quite like a casual way, but it came from I knew that I couldn't ask for anything for myself. I had a job, I had a family, my parents were well. I'm doing like health. My health is okay. I didn't have anything that I could feel that I needed to ask for myself. So that's why I thought that it needs to be something that actually matters. Yeah, that was really like a turn point for me in my practice.
This is why I wanted to mention it to people, it was such a huge turning point. And for me, when I came across this story, it was very inspiring, because I think what you're about to come to here is that it went from a path of I want to do this to see the improvement for me, and all of a sudden it felt, listening to this, that everything turned around. All of a sudden it wasn't so much about you. Now this is where Bodhicitta comes into play. Bodhicitta, the wish for other beings to become free, the wish for the benefits of your practice to be for everyone.
Yes. And that I mean, we say when we start our practice sessions, we say a prayer where we ask for blessings, and that the practice may benefit all. I mean, that's kind of like a fake it till you make it thing. So, I mean, you say it because you're supposed to say it, and you try to feel it, but I mean, you do your best. That's the thing, that you do your best. But at some point you realize that this is kind of bigger than you, that this goes beyond, and that was the moment for me when it kind of crystallized that this is something that I wish for everyone, that my practice, well, not just that my practice be of benefit for everybody, but that everybody would be released from their suffering, that there is a way out, that there are tools and there are methods to find that kind of peace and quiet and happiness and joy, that basic, that kind of authentic self that you have inside, that's buried underneath all the traumas and all the pain and all the confusion. And that's kind of when my practice started to skyrocket then.
And I found it interesting, just as I was looking at your timeline just earlier, and I was thinking that the first time I met you was in the November retreat, and I opened my 7th. And I think this is about the same time as I came across your story, this particular story. So back when this happened for you, it was quite inspiring from the sounds of things to the rest of the Sangha as well, because you shot through all of the booming openings from sort of October time until December, and you opened them so rapidly that it seemed to really take it out of you. And I looked at my timeline, and my timeline is virtually the same as yours for the openings, where I'd met you and you were talking about, well, this is for all beings. The Bodhicitta is what's really going to help your practice. And that was sort of quite an aha moment. And then things shifted for me very quickly. But then I didn't look at your advice, because after you perfected your first in the January, and then you had quite a few months off, didn't you? Because it really seemed to take it out of your system. And I didn't listen to that. I kept trying to go with mine, and I completely wiped myself out.
It's quite a physical process at the same time. Even if you're working on like a mental level, the mind and the body are just so intertwined that we call that like the body mind. So you have the energetic side, which is the mind, and then the physical body, and then the connection between the two of them. So when you do changes in one, it affects the other. It actually felt like a huge wave that I was riding on. Like I could only like kind of buckle up and kind of keep on and cling on, and then just like see how far it will take me. It felt like I wasn't even in control in a sense. I could sense that it kind of started to die down, but I knew that it would still carry me through the perfection of the first.
Oh, right.
So, and after that, I started to have all kinds of strange symptoms, like my liver acting up and the gallbladder, and I went to Western doctors, and they took all kinds of tests, but everything was okay. But it was just like so much purification in such a short and condensed time that it took a while for the physical body to adjust to those to the new way of being. Yeah.
Was it quite a release for you? I'm just comparing it to my own experience, where as I reached the Mahasiddha Bhumis and then I opened those, there was just such a release, almost an emotional release. It felt like the top of a volcano had been released, and now all of a sudden all my emotions could flow, and maybe all of these traumas from my past were being released now, and the body there's too much for the body. You need to take time to rest.
Yeah, I think I experienced, at least with the opening of the 11th, for a few days it felt like my body was healing itself. That the traces from the burnout and everything were kind of fading away, and I could feel like this new kind of aliveness both in my body and in my mind come. So the first kind of really big shift where something was like seriously different was the 11th Bhumi, like the first Mahasiddha Bhumi, where you access the natural state. It becomes, even if it's just like a small opening in the Bhumi, but there's like a small trickle of the natural state that's constantly there. And that becomes even more profound with the opening of the 12th, and even more profound with opening the 13th. So having that natural state always accessible, it doesn't mean that it's stable and always there, but that you knew kind of what phone number to dial in, and so you knew kind of, you had like the address in your mind to the natural state. You weren't just like confusingly like going through the phone book, but you actually knew that, okay, that's the thing that we've been working towards. So that was a really big game changer. It made like meditation practice much more easy, because you knew what you were looking for. You already had those kind of small glimpses here and there, and they became a bit longer, like from a fraction of a second to something that's a bit longer and a bit longer. And now you knew that it's always accessible. You didn't need to do anything, but you could feel the natural state, the basic state of your own mind present, even if you kind of lost it at times, but it was still there. So yeah.
So now you know what to look for. So how did you know that the first perfected? What was the clue?
I've had with all the openings and perfectionings, as I said, that it's quite a physical process. So I've had a very visceral experience of them, not just like a mental one, but that it feels like an expansion and opening up in the physical body as well. And for me, at least, the openings, when we have the bhumis, the plates as kind of sheets, one above the next one, the openings pierce through them one at a time, and the perfections make the whole sheet disappear. So the opening process felt more like where you went up, 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 and the perfection phase was more sideways and integrating, and following a sideways and integrating, and that natural state of the mind becoming more embodied, becoming fuller, the experience becoming more comprehensive. So and more, it's kind of like you have a light, and you just you turn it on more and more and more, so the light kind of gets integrated, and it covers more and more about inside your body and outside. But it's like integrating the emptiness into something even deeper, like an even more comprehensive understanding of emptiness, that an emptiness being that there is no self in all those things that you experience.
Yeah, so for myself, I'm trying to in a sense work out how you were so sure of these timeframes, because when I look at your diary, you quite clearly know when these events happened. I know when 5th and 6th opening happened. I know when 11th and 13th happened. I know when a couple of the perfections happened, but I don't know which ones they were. So this is interesting to note that the perfections you're noticing are much like it kind of goes this way you're sort of describing. I'm trying to get a sense of, you're such a felt person, and this is something that I think is not so natural for me. This is something that I'm having to really work on. But I'm trying to get a sense of how you were so sure that at that point when the edges aren't there anymore.
Well, there were the perfection of the 3rd and 4th. I wasn't quite sure of, and then I noticed that with the 5th, I knew there was a shift. It wasn't that big. I almost always had a dark night before an opening or before a perfectioning. And that kind of also was a telltale sign that I could feel miserable and really lousy, and like all kinds of existential pains and fear of death and what not. I mean, depending on, I mean, it could be like I remember kind of my mood shifting from within 15 minutes from being okay to feeling really, really, really like so bad. And then I was like, okay, so this isn't really normal. So it's almost like a psychosis in a way. You're just like so absorbed in that that kind of negative mood. And when that then suddenly it's like a light switch that it's on and then it's off. That's also one of those was like a telltale sign for me that I'm approaching a shift when it's getting worse and worse and worse, and then something happens. Usually I had a physical and I could see in my mind's eye also that something happened, and then I would notice that there was just like this even deeper relief and even deeper kind of clarity, and just like this naturalness somehow it just gets on to be deeper and more profound, and you're just like and then suddenly you notice that you're back in the hamster wheel, and your kind of the mind is again starting to go to those dark places, because the new increased clarity shines light on the next kind of garbage that you have in your system, the next karmas and the next traumas and the next thought patterns and stuff that you have stored there. So it's actually that your own increased clarity shines more brighter, so and that you can notice the finer stuff that you previously couldn't see. You have those kind of obscurances and traumas and things already in your mind. Practice makes you see them, and that's why it's uncomfortable. So And that's like an ongoing cycle. So you have a rough period, and then you have a shift, and then it's nice, and then you kind of slide back into the rough period, and then you have a shift, and then you have a good time again for a while, and then you slide back. So it's this kind of ongoing wave motion throughout the openings and the perfections. But there's an end. That's the good thing. There is an end.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yes.
So let's fast forward a little bit to when you were perfecting Bhumi 9. Things seem to have progressed quite steadily to that point, but then you seem to get a little bit stuck on Bhumi 9. But you could notice these different dark places, or I forget how you describe them, dark and gooey or something. But you had a real strong felt sense of where you were working within your Bhumi place.
Yeah, that was a tricky one. I was working on it. I have to check my I have the same list as you have. I can tell you I have the original one.
Oh, that's the original. All right.
Yeah. So the 9th, yeah, I was working on it for 9 months.
6, 7, 8 was in 3 months, and then it took you 9 months for.
Yeah. Like the first Bhumi is the solid sense of self, and then you have the 1 like the 2 to 6 through 6 are associated with emotions, and then you have the subconscious mind, like the 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the further you get, the subtler the things are that you're working on. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like going from a rainforest with chopping down vines with a machete, just like swinging, and you're hitting things with like every swing. And then at the end, you don't need to kind of, your aim doesn't need to be in place. You're just like swinging like mad. And then at the end, you're kind of like this Zen gardener, and you have this kind of almost completely empty garden, and then you have a pair of tweezers, and you kind of have to pick that one black grain, and then when you think you find it, you notice it wasn't that one and it slipped away. So like the difficulty level increases so much because the things that you're targeting, as that's kind of like the point because it's your subconscious mind. Yes. And the further you get into working with your subconscious mind, the trickier it is to kind of pinpoint what it is that you're working on. It's working. It feels like you're working with shades and veils and fog and mist and like murky, sticky, gooey things. But as soon as you touch it, it just like dissolves. At the end, like where you were talking, like where what you said that I'd written in my practice log about feeling and perceiving like quite clearly. So where it was located in the aura, the things that I had still to purify, it felt like as soon as I was able to purify one part, it was like what's the name of the game where you have these things that pop up here and there and you're supposed to smash them? Yeah.
Mole something.
Yeah, whack-a-mole, I think.
That's it.
Yeah. So as soon as I was like, yes, now I got that one kind of cleared, there's a whoop, there's something else, and then next one, and then whoop. So it was just like an ongoing process of kind of finding new places that you weren't able to perceive before. But fortunately, there are practices in Amrita Mandala for that, shattering of the subconscious mind that really targets the subconscious mind in a very, very profound way. And doing that practice actually was the thing that then finally made my 9th perfect. I was grinding on a piece of a tiny, tiny grain of sand, trying to polish it away. grinding it away, and then poof, and I was like, yes!
Oh, what a relief.
Yeah. Yeah,
What did
but
that
it took a
tiny
while.
grain of sand represent? Did it represent anything for you in emotional sense?
It was related to something from a past life. I had died, and I was looking kind of up slightly to the right. I was lying on the ground, and I was looking slightly up to the right, and I saw my house where I had lived, or where I lived,
Mm-hmm.
and then I died. So that's kind of the image that I had at the
Wow.
moment when it kind
Oh, was
of
it?
disappeared.
Cool.
Yeah, it was like looking at a photo.
Mm.
So there wasn't any emotions or anything else attached to it. That was just like an image that kind of floated through my mind, and then it was gone. Yeah.
So now you're on 10th. Did you have any cessations? I'm sure you'd had a couple of short cessations at some point, but then I know on 10th you had at least one or two quite long cessations, didn't you? Oh, should we just describe what a cessation? Do you want to describe what a cessation is?
Sure. It's kind of when the conceptualizing mind stops, when you're perceiving without any labeling. I'm trying to describe this in a really down-to-earth way so that people can relate. So when you're looking at a chair, you're not associating any feelings or emotions, you're not projecting anything, you're not analyzing it, you're kind of just like observing it in its most bare form.
Mm-hmm.
So the chattering mind stops, the analyzing mind stops, and you're just perceiving everything. It kind of feels like your mind shuts off in a way, because you're so used to that you have the kind of like the background programs all running, and the all the tabs that are open, and like it's, and then when all that just stops, and everything becomes, for a few moments, everything becomes just like perfect. You don't have you're not uncomfortable with anything, you're not angry, you're not happy. It's just like this perfect like stability of being.
All of a sudden you're in your Buddha nature with no
Yes.
effort.
Yes.
That's your experience. This is, you're in your Buddha nature. This can happen before you reach Buddhahood. You can experience short glimpses of it, maybe a few seconds to begin with in the early days, and then minutes, hours, and then even a few days at a time before you reach the final cessation, the complete realization of emptiness.
Yeah, exactly. So it might sound like talking about Buddha nature. It's actually just a way of describing us becoming ourselves. Like me becoming the version of me who doesn't have any traumas or fixations or preconceived ideas about good and bad. Just like the most authentic, genuine, pure, loving self that you can be. It sounds really grand to talk about Buddha nature and perfecting of the 10th and realizing emptiness, but it's all, the whole process is about us becoming ourselves, seeing through the traumas and seeing through the through all the baggage that we've kind of gathered along the road through childhood and teenage years, school, college, or university, working life, bad parenting, being bullied, whatnot, and kind of unravel or seeing that layer by layer we can shed that and become who we actually truly genuinely are. Yeah.
As samsaric beings, we sort of want something grandiose to happen, this sort of high and mighty thing, but the way it sounds like all of you guys describe it is this normalness. As a samsaric being, I think, well, that sounds a bit dull, but you're describing it as, well, what it was that it wasn't normal before. And all that stickiness and trauma is now released, and now this is how it always should have been. I'm using Robert's words there. So I was asking you about your cessations. You'd had some cessations by this point.
Exactly, and I started to notice when they started to get longer.
How long?
I remember we had a quite hot summer in 2021, and I'm usually quite uncomfortable when it's really, really warm. But I was scraping away paint on our summer cottage and painting and fixing windows and like putting in putty and painting there. So like being physically quite active, chopping wood with an axe and like quite heavy stuff. And at some point I noticed that I haven't felt annoyed and pissed off for 2 days. And that would normally be like, I dislike like being hot and sweaty just because I think it's really uncomfortable. So I was just like, something's going on. And I was like, oh my God, this is just perfect. This is how it should be. And the thing is that it's so natural. And when you're really, really close to the end, it's just like the movement is this big in your mind.
What is it?
And the only thing that shifts is that one moment you're annoyed, and then you notice a few hours later you're not annoyed anymore. So that kind of nagging, like the tiny chafing that you have inside, that switched off when I had that. That was for me the telltale sign, just like close to the end, that I was having a cessation, because everything else was so clear. But there was still just like a small drop of being pissed off. Just like, that kind of, and then suddenly there. And for the first, like, I noticed that it went like 2 or 3 days was when I had like, let's say, long cessation. And that felt just like, I mean, so good, so natural that I was just like, this is how it should be. Yeah. Then I had a longer one that lasted a week. I was already kind of hoping, because we had in the Sangha that, okay, so you're confirmed to have perfected the 10th when the cessation has lasted over a week. And then I was like, okay, I'm a week in. And then I dropped back.
Oh man.
And that was, I was just, oh my God, it was brutal.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, I was, and that kind of led me to this really strong kind of ping pong, that I was so frustrated. I wanted it to be over. I just wanted it to be over. I was snapping at the kids. I was just like, I was behaving like somebody who had like the worst day, and it just like kept on going. I was not fun to be around at the time, because I was just so frustrated. And the thing is that you've removed all the shit from your system, and then you're stuck with this one final idea. I want to perfect my 10th. I want to have perfect emptiness inside. I want that. That's kind of, that one thing is the final thing. For me, it was between reaching it and then wanting to reach it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, all the wanting, it has like this constricting and kind of really shrinking feeling to it, and you have to let go of that, because you can't want that, because that's selfing. That's a self-based. Even if it's kind of like the end goal, you need to let go. And that was kind of, I was just like, oh my God, how can I let go of the thing that I actually want? I was like, okay, I just need to trust the process. I just need to trust the process. It got me this far. I just need to trust the process. And a week later,
was it?
then the final session started.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it's, don't get me wrong, it's full with I mean, it's a big relief and release every time you have a shift, and you become more natural, and it feels better. But the process in itself is really, really tough and rough. I remember Baba at some point comparing it to a dragon level retreat, practicing as a lay person with a practice regime that has to fit into normal, ordinary life with normal responsibilities. So it's still not over with 10 perfect. That's kind of emptiness inside of the mind.
Yeah.
But then you have the I mean, if we're talking technical terms, that the Dharmakaya, and then we have the Sambhogakaya, like the enjoyment aspect, and the luminosity, what a difficult word, that come after that make it just so much richer, so much more alive, so much more joyful. And I remember after having perfected the 10th, I was sitting at the kitchen table reading I was on my phone reading something, and I could notice emotions bubbling up. I was like, oh my God, this was supposed to be over. But then I kind of looked at the emotions like, but there's nothing attached to them. There's like no constricting feeling. They're just kind of, they're coming, but they're leaving without a trace. And I was like, okay. So I didn't drop back to samsara. I'm still kind of in, like, I'm still in that empty space. It's okay. I can have emotions. And that's kind of where it comes. So we go from like seeing all things empty, but then it starts to get really juicy. And then you start kind of to get the life and the living and the kind of aliveness aspect back, integrated into the emptiness inside. And that's when you start to kind of feel like a kid. Like you could, when you get happy, you could do kind of like a dance, and feeling, you get angry, but I mean, 2 seconds later, you don't feel anything in your physical body anymore. Yeah. It's like a gust of wind that comes and goes, and you have that feeling going on, whatever it is, and then it's gone. And it doesn't leave that you're not feeling heavy or tired for a day, but it's just perfect. It's an emotion in its most pure form. So, and that doesn't either mean that you can't have what you would call bad emotions. I've been angry, frustrated, but basically you can have the whole array of emotions. But the thing is that we're just so used to thinking, or somehow there's this idea that once you have emptiness inside, and like the first reach first level of Buddhahood, that you're kind of above everything, and it's just happy, joy, and love and compassion, and everything is just positive feelings. But that's just kind of half of it. You have the other half of the emotions, like the negative emotions. You have wrathful deities, wrathful expressions, and they're just part of the whole vast array of emotions that human beings experience. So they are as enlightened as expressions, the negative ones, as the positive ones, because there's no self-based emotion behind them. It's just the pure form of the expression that comes through. And that was a big thing to realize, that it's not an absence of emotions, but it's the richness in the emotions. They're not coming from a self-based place, but from the natural state.
So how was it when you first realized this emptiness? How was it that you knew that this is emptiness now? Was there a difference between the cessation before and then you had this cessation? But was there any worry that, okay, well, this cessation might last a week and then it will all happen again? Or by this time, did you know that this is the final?
There was, I felt pretty certain already with the first long one, or with the week-long one. But the level of certainty when it actually perfected the 10th was there's a quality to the natural state, to our own mind, which is called knowingness, kind of like the mind recognizing itself, and that was completely unwavering. That was just like, this is it. There was nothing more and nothing less, and that was the end goal of emptiness, or realization. Like the mind had recognized itself as it should be recognized. Like the emptiness of it was full. There was nothing to add or take away, and there was like a stability that wasn't there in the cessations, and a confidence as well that wasn't there.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you remember the precise moment that it happened? Like, where were you or what you were doing?
I was actually, my daughter was going to bed, and she was upset about something, and I was lying next to her in bed.
Yeah.
And then it kind of struck me that's like I was really tired. I don't know, it was pretty late in the evening, and I just wanted to go to sleep myself. But I was in her bed and comforting her, and she fell asleep, and I just didn't have the energy to get up. So I was kind of just lying there and kind of going through this idea about bodhicitta and kind of this showing compassion. That's kind of like that this is actually kind of like a selfless service. That I'm comforting her and wishing or trying to make her feel better, and that there's like this compassion aspect there, and that's when it happened.
Oh wow, how beautiful! I didn't know that. That's very poetic.
Yeah, and that's kind of also like this bodhicitta that we were talking, that kind of rocket fueled the progress from the 6th, was actually the same thing that was kind of the fuel for the 10th as well. Then there was this certainty in it that wasn't there in the cessations before. Yeah.
So this is something that builds confidence in me, with someone like me with my analytical mind. And I read some of your posts, and you're talking about feeling these auras and visions that you have, and bumblebees sitting in flowers, and these types of things. And I have one mind which wants to be open to this and really take it in and believe it. And you're really aware of the progress that's going on. But then part of my mind says, is some of this your imagination? Are you somehow making this up in a way, sort of kidding yourself? Maybe this is some sort of placebo effect to you. But just to remind the viewers that this is well over a year ago now, and reading your journals and chatting to you and hearing about your journey along the way, there's so much ups and downs and difficulties that you had to go through as a mother, and etc., living a busy life, and you've got kids to look after, you're going to work, you've had these traumas that you're working through, and just to hear this story as you go along, and then to speak to you now, and you talk from this point of utter certainty about this realization of emptiness, that this emptiness is a stability that has been permanent, all pervasive, as it were. There's no part of that emptiness that has ever gone away. So
no.
So for someone like me with an analytical mind, it's that helps.
You see those kind of things that are occurring that can I mean, it's when you take everything away, all the confusion and all the pain, so what you're left with is love and compassion and this basic goodness that we have inside of ourselves. This natural, effortless goodness. It doesn't mean that it's blind or that it's kind of stupid in a way or naive.
Yeah.
Because there's the wisdom aspect in it as well. So you can be, it's like you could kind of compare it to tough love with kids or something. That it doesn't mean that you're like a doormat. Partly you become aware of your own boundaries because you know you learn, you get to learn and know who you are. You've gone through all your shitty experiences, you've gone through all the traumas, you've gone through all the things that have caused you pain and kind of like mental discomfort. So what you're left with is the purest version of yourself, like in your mind, or on when we were talking about the emptiness. Like you don't have those self-based habits and tendencies anymore that you had. And after that, I was kind of struggling with finding motivation, what to do, because I'd been propelled by like self-based motivators. I want to prove myself. Well, I never searched for a career, even if I want, or even if it kind of landed in my lap. But I wanted to show that I can rise up to it, to the challenge, and kind of those that, or avoiding things. So doing things because you're avoiding something, and suddenly you're in this kind of empty space. There's like nothing pushing or pulling you in any direction. Like this was for me directly after the 10th perfected, and a while after that, I wanted to progress in my emptiness inside. So I was meditating, and I noticed that it had a good effect on me. So I kind of it was like a positive feedback loop, and suddenly you don't have any feedback loops there, and then you're just like it's like this empty vast hall, and you're just kind of shouting that which direction do you want to go? And
so this is new territory.
It's new territory. I'm not saying it's like this for everybody, but for me it was. So there was nothing that was pushing or pulling me in any direction, and I was kind of feeling a bit lost in a sense, because all those things that had kind of made me work or move forward or do something kind of dropped away because they were self-based. And then I noticed that kind of like the only things that make sense and actually make me happy are those things where I can do some good. Help somebody, somebody from the Sangha if they're having a rough time or if they want to chat or text. Helping out with some charities that I'm supporting, organizing retreats, kind of these acts of compassion, these acts of Bodhicitta, these acts of goodness that makes you feel good inside and makes the recipient feel good inside. Those kinds of, that's the only thing that actually existentially makes sense anymore. Everything else is just to make ends meet, but there's no kind of the burn and the drive in the relative world. I mean, as in being like career or something like that. I mean, it's okay. I'm not saying that, but kind of like the fire that was there has died out and been substituted with something which is much more profound and something which is much more grounded and wholesome, more genuinely me, if I say it like that, and makes me feel good and doing in that it makes me feel good, it has a positive effect on my surroundings and kind of my expression of it's an expression of my bodhicitta. That's actually the thing that makes sense anymore.
So it seems to me the thing that's opened up is the clarity with knowing yourself fully. Those words I borrow from Tia. She said that she truly knew herself now, and it's a clarity in your wakefulness, in the sense that there is no more subconscious anymore. Nothing is hidden from your view, and so now all of these self-based tendencies of these motivations to go this way or that in your career or your family life or material possessions, is there a sense that things flip around in a way? And now the clarity comes because now you're aware of yourself so fully, you understand what makes you and everyone around you happy.
I think it's also I had the idea for a long time, to be able to really be happy, you needed to live a small life. I wasn't exactly sure what the small life was, but I had this idea. And I thought it might be like asceticism or something, kind of renouncing things. But that's not the tantric way. I mean, we're tantric practitioners. So we use all the aspects that we have in our daily lives as fuel for our practice. That doesn't mean that we need to renounce things. I don't know, we can have a car and we can have jewelry and we can wear jewelry and nice clothes, but it doesn't mean that we're attached to them. Because and if we are attached to them, we use that as practice material. That's kind of the way that the tantric path works, that everything is allowed. Everything, all emotions are allowed. All aspects of life, food, enjoying company, going to concerts, listening to music, dancing, laughing, having sex, discussions, whatnot, like the whole vast array of what life has to offer is the tantric path. And kind of the emptiness insight just means that you're not attached to it, even if you have those in your life. So I kind of got that wrong early on, and kind of thought that it was renouncing things that made things easy, and not the I didn't understand, I hadn't made the connection of non-attachment, that it's actually the attachment to the things that makes life difficult. Not that you have those things, but that you're attached to them. And that's the thing that causes friction.
I see that in myself, that I was quite attached to minimalism and, in a way, an ascetic. I was going down that road, attached to an ascetic life. It's sort of I was a bit blinded to that. You're trying to renounce things physically in order to unattach them mentally. But as tantrics, we're focused purely on the letting go at a mental level.
Exactly. And that's also what I never actually fully lived that thought out, and in kind of renouncing things. That's not the tantric way, and I'm actually happy for it. It's because that means that you can be a lay practitioner and have kids and a job and everything, and that serves. Because who can go and on a 3-year retreat or take 3 months off or something? Those people are far and few apart, especially if you have a family. So something that works is like an effective method that works. I don't think I would have made it this far if I wouldn't have had so efficient tools in Rainbow Body Yoga and the different levels of empowerments in there, in that system. Just because my existential pain wasn't strong enough in the begin or from the beginning and in the beginning, and I wasn't kind of a seeker in that sense. I didn't have a meditation regime, and I don't think I could have stuck with a meditation regime if I wouldn't have had that kind of like seen my own progress and what kind of experiences are the effect of those experiences and insights in my day-to-day life. So
perhaps I'll take the opportunity here to backtrack a little bit, because I didn't ask you too much about your practice, but I think that might be important for viewers looking, because you had a busy life. So how did you fit your practice in? What were you doing in, say, the later stages of perfection? How did you find time to get your practice in?
A lot of my practice I was doing in my car on my commute to work. I drive an hour in both directions, so I used that time both listening to retreat recordings and doing guru yoga, mantra chanting, chanting the empowerment mantras. Especially towards the end, I think the kind of like the practice changes as you progress. So you start off with like a fixed practice formula, rainbow body yoga, and it's set up in a certain way, and it addresses all the different layers of the mind. And as you progress, you kind of notice, you start to kind of freestyle, because you have a pretty big toolkit, and you can, it's kind of like, what kind of food do I want today, or what kind of food does my practice need today? And then you kind of pick from that toolbox.
And you're a chef that understands the principles behind making a good meal.
Yes, exactly, because you know kind of what you're looking for, like on how your mind should feel, and you start to kind of intuit and kind of flow between those different aspects of the practice and that toolkit, and find and make the practice your own in that sense. And then especially towards the end, when you're working with really subtle things, I noticed that kind of like when you're doing the two-part formula for awakening, I return to that same process of recognizing how does the mind feel when it's clear, the natural state. And then if I had a thought, I would always kind of filter it through. Does this come from an open and aware state, or does this have a contraction in it? If it has a contraction in it, I started to kind of peel the layers and ask myself, okay, so why this feeling? Okay, and then what lies behind or below that? And then the following one, and then the following one, and then poof, suddenly there wasn't that. So like the two-part formula is a genius tool, because it works early on, and it works like quite all through the end as well.
And that's such a practical way to put it. You're including this directly in your life. You're using your sensitivity to notice these emotions that you have on a moment-to-moment basis. And as soon as you're feeling that contraction in them, okay, well, this is a chance to have a look at this, right? I can focus on this now. Why am I feeling this? Oh, this is some self-based stuff coming up into it. And that, exactly. So now it becomes a whole holistic thing.
Exactly, and that's kind of like a really big shift from just practicing on the cushion and bringing practice into your day-to-day life. So also just like the simple idea, I remember quite early on, Baba was talking about ethics and being a student and a yogi, and one of them, or the idea was like the ethics behind or of being a practitioner, and like the concept of non-harming and not lying, and I took on that pretty early on as an idea, that the thought of, if I need to lie, I'm trying to either protect someone or protect myself from disclosing the truth. And if I'm protecting myself, I have some kind of why am I doing that? There's some kind of reaction that makes me do that. So I really, really tried to stick to that. When I noticed that I'm trying to kind of stray away from the telling the truth path, just by saying a white lie or something, that why is that? That why am I doing this? So kind of, it's not just about having a fixed practice on the cushion, but really trying to make it part of your everyday life and observing because what's happening in your mind is what comes out from your mouth and the thoughts that you have. So really paying attention to that, kind of not believing everything that your mind feeds you. It's kind of fake news, and you have to be really kind of discerning that is that actually true or not. Yeah.
So now that you're it's over a year ago since you had this insight, can you try and describe to me the difference between the experience as you're perfecting 10th Bhumi and how you experience true emptiness? So I imagine things were pretty subtle towards the end of 10th. You're working with the finer stuff. But is there any way to describe what is different about this experience still at perfecting 10th and having perfected 10th?
Because there is so little, you've had several cessations, so you know what the basic state, the emptiness, full emptiness is of the mind. You know that because you've had those cessations.
So you've got your compass aligned.
Exactly. You're really aware of what the end goal is. And so it just, those moments when you're not in that, you're acutely aware because there's nothing obstructing those final bits of confusion that you have left. So it's again this really, it's like a ping pong between confusion and clarity. And then you slide back into confusion, and then you notice that I'm in the clarity again, and then you slide back into the confusion. Like the insights and those cessations and those glimpses, they're like, as we spoke of earlier, they're just like the fraction of a second, and then they become longer and slightly longer and slightly longer. And then at some point you realize that, okay, full emptiness inside, first stage of Buddhahood in this life, is possible. Then you kind of progress a bit more in that, and then you realize that, okay, I have that emptiness in me, I have that insight in me, I'm just stuck in this confusion for a while longer. So the table kind of flips from kind of seeing yourself as a samsaric being working towards emptiness insight or emptiness realization, and then you realize that I am that, I only have these few bits and pieces left. And for me, that it's a confidence booster, like, because the insight is something that nobody can take away from you, but it's your own insight. You don't need verification from someone else to say that, because your confidence in the emptiness inside at that point is so strong that you know, like you said, that you have your kind of aim set and the compass pointing in the right direction. But the thing is that as long as you have even the tiniest trace of confusion and karmas left in your system, that's not it. You still need to work through those. So you're still as screwed as you were, but just because of that tiny bit, and then you're acutely aware of it, and it's so frustrating.
So this sounds a common experience, because I'm sure I've heard this from a couple of you now, this idea of ping-ponging. Maybe that's some sort of sign that you're ping-ponging from utter clarity to this confusion and pain, and there's a bit of this ping-ponging before the actual full insight happening.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that it feels like ping pong, even if we're talking about, we've dug through like almost a whole the size of a stadium down to the middle of the earth. Like that's kind of like the groundwork that we've done. And now we're really talking about like sand grain kind of fine stuff, like those few last bits. So it might sound quite extreme when we say ping pong, but it's just because the contrast between the ultimately clear mind and the last bits of confusion are just, they're so highlighted because of the contrast between them. So
perhaps I can read something that you wrote. This is in your early days of purification, but it might give us something to talk about here. So one of your main insights, it sounded, in the early days, you said, things are as they are has become my favorite thing to say. Phenomena that arise without attachment and dissolve without leaving a trace. Things can be complicated and ambiguous, but it doesn't bother. All things are perfect the way they arise, be they good, bad, or anything in between.
Wow. I'm impressed.
Some profound insight, Helena.
I need to quote myself sometime. Yeah, that's
so
kind of...
what I want to ask about that from a samsaric point of view is, how is it that things are as they are? How is it that everything is perfect? Surely something that's bad is bad and something that is good. And so from the samsaric point of view, it's quite hard to sort of understand.
It's not easy to understand as a samsaric being, because that's an insight that comes with emptiness insight. It's called also one taste, but it's basically the understanding that there is no good or bad, that samsara is nirvana and nirvana is samsara, that things that arise, you don't have labels like good and bad, but the things just arise, like I said in that quote. Basically, it means that there is no duality, that there is no separation, and that no separation also covers good and bad, as in being, just being. But we're just so used to putting labels on things that it's difficult to see past them. But it's basically that the idea or the concept and insight that you don't have separation, that you think are happening as they are happening because of whatever reason they are happening. And it's our selfing and self-based mind that attaches those good and bad and want and not want, when in fact they're just things that arise within this awareness.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I remember I had that exact question at some point.
Oh yeah.
And yes, and Baba's reply was that practice and you'll find out. So but yeah, so I did practice, and
you found out.
no, I know, and it started to make sense, and it started to make more sense and more sense and more sense. Yeah.
So I want to come to a bit of, how is your practice now in terms of, is concentration much easier? But for meditation itself, is it something that switches on instantly now as compared to perhaps before emptiness realization? Is there a sense that you sit on the cushion and...
Definitely, because there's less things obstructing the mind. You're able to perceive and feel and see things more clearly. I'm talking about kind of subtle seeing. Do you know the feeling that you have after a long, good retreat when you're just like feeling really fresh
Oh, yeah.
And you're kind of like have this really nice, good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that all the time.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
good.
no difference if you're on the retreat. You're as fresh when you go into the retreat as you are when you end the retreat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it's
So,
useful for this next part of the
yeah.
process.
Yes. Okay. I thought you meant kind of like the emptiness aspect. But
Oh, yeah,
yeah, that's the thing.
I was, but I imagine the fact that it's always on is now you can see the subtlest of the subtle now, which is what you're working
Yeah,
with.
that's what I'm working with, but it's still kind of like a mapping process for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't have, my aim isn't like completely set yet, but I mean, this is kind of what it is, that there's yet no one to reach light body or full rainbow body.
Uh-huh.
So we're kind of mapping things, and especially Baba, and receiving teachings and empowerments, and finding the final pieces to the puzzle, so to say. And I was just reading my testimony or account about my practice path.
Oh, yeah.
And I was reading it, and especially the time after my 10th perfected, and the 11th and 12th and 13th, with all the enjoyment aspects, kind of just like life becoming really juicy. I was like, oh my God, I want that back, because now I'm working on clearing like physical like traces in the physical body, as we were talking in the beginning. So you have the mind and you have the physical body, and they're interconnected. And in the interface between the mind and the physical body, like the traumas in the mind kind of leave imprints on the physical body. So now you have an empty body, or empty mind, but you still have to purify those traces that like those imprints. I mean, if you're keep squeezing your hands tight, you can see where the hands were or fingers were squeezing. So kind of those imprints kind of echoes in the physical body. So
so this is post-Buddhahood
that's kind of
practice.
This is, well, yes, like the first stage of Buddhahood is the emptiness aspect of the mind, but the emptiness aspect of the mind doesn't cover the emptiness of the physical body yet. So that's what I'm working on now in my practice. And as I was said, that I was reading my what I'd written just after the 10th, and I was just like, oh my God, I was just so happy and content, and I had no idea what was coming.
Yeah.
And I just want that back. No, not really. I don't want to go through what I've been going through lately, but it kind of takes on a new, like, your perception shifts. So you've been focused on emptiness, in all aspects. Then then comes the aliveness and the juiciness and the freshness, and like the really potent aliveness. Then you notice that you're kind of starting to fall back into something, and it took a while to understand what it was.
How long are you talking about when you say a while?
It's been going on, well, the good and nice part lasted for a couple of months.
Yeah.
After the 10th perfected. And then you're kind of starting to work on those trauma or echoes, the imprints that are stored in the physical body. The difference there is that when you're working on your mind, you're kind of chipping away small pieces at a time, and different aspects of a trauma. But you're never addressing the whole trauma in one go, but just like some aspects. So and kind of chipping away on that. But now when you're purifying the echoes and the imprints from your physical body, the whole trauma hits you in one go. And what makes it quite straining is that you have a completely clear and empty mind, and then you have this trauma bubble up from your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's nothing in your mind that obstructs seeing the pain and the discomfort and the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
it's so gripping. It just like it still tugs. Your mind doesn't stray, but you're just acutely aware of the trauma that you're working on and that arises from the physical body.
So it's sort of a tug in the physical body. So the emptiness aspect is perfectly clear and wakeful. I'm just trying to get a better sort of dive into this a little bit, because it could be confusing. Well, it has been confusing for me. I've been chatting to you guys for a while now to try and sort of work through this in my head. But we assume that Buddhahood, everything is perfect all the time. But now here we're working to the light body, the full rainbow body, and we're working with the trapped karma in the physical cells. So that tug is going on, is it sort of in the physical body, but you're perfectly aware, it's within perfect clarity.
It's within perfect clarity, exactly. If you get really scared or frightened, you have a physical reaction, and usually you kind of feel like your mind and your focus kind of goes like in a fight or flight mode, and you get kind of like tunnel vision, and your heart start to race and everything, and you notice that your mind kind of, you just like that your mind also kind of goes for like zook, like this. You have the same physical experience. You get that kind of you get the physical anxiety, you get the heart palpitations, you get the whole physical experience, but it happens inside a completely clear mind. So you're aware of all the aspects of that emotion that just arose. So it's not just like a tiny bit of being frightened. It's the whole experience, like 360 degrees in all directions, in full color, like the whole horribleness of it just like washes over you inside a perfectly clear mind.
I'm hearing brief glimpses about these accounts from you guys and Bubba and Simha, etc. This is still an exploration for our Sangha, working this out. But from the sounds of it, it's the trauma is there, but now because we have a completely clear and wakeful mind, there's no part of us which can run away from that anymore. So we're faced with that, and there's nothing to turn away from, because we can't turn away from it. It's there and apparent. And so it sounds from the accounts of things that this is quite difficult stuff to deal with, even as fully wakeful beings.
Yeah, it is, and especially the thing that there's nothing in your mind that you can hide behind. There's no gunk in your mind, there's no confusion in your mind, there's nothing that you can I think I just wrote in my practice log about this, that you can, because if you're in mental pain, you like, or emotional turmoil, you can think that, okay, I'll detonate the bomb in my life just so that I'll get some change, and you kind of think that will alleviate the situation. But there's no different. Like for me now, I could be on holiday on the world's most beautiful island, or I could fly to space, or I could sleep and wake up in the morning. And I mean, I could do the nicest things in the world. I wouldn't have anywhere to hide that pain and discomfort that arises from the physical body.
Yeah.
So that's kind of also like a thing that either you finish practice and reach light body, or then you're stuck in suffering like this for the rest of your life. That's something that we want to. So I mean, in that sense, I mean, I've had the same way that you have cessations of the mind,
I was going to
where
ask you
everything's
about that. Yeah.
you can have physical cessations as well. where the body feels just perfect. It feels absolutely alive, absolutely joyous. It feels just like a physical body should feel. I know it sounds really weird. It's like the same thing with awakening, that you're like, oh my God, how didn't I realize this? That this is what it's so natural, that it feels so complete and so whole and so wholesome and so joyous and so capable and light and fresh, and just like something that I've never experienced, like such perfection of like the union between mind and body, that it's just I've had it a few times, just like the first one was like a fraction of a second, then the second one was maybe 2 seconds, and then the third one was 10 to 15 seconds maybe. So enough time that I could actually kind of look into it, like, because the first ones were just like, I was just like, oh, what, like a fast car driving by, and I was like, oh, what was that? But this time, like when it was longer, I could actually kind of tune in and notice things that felt different.
So just to be clear for the listener here, these are different to the cessations you had before the perfection of 10th Bhumi. In a way, those were cessations into emptiness, but now this is a different kind of cessation. This is a cessation into the full light body.
Yes, exactly. The emptiness of the mind has the aliveness and the joyfulness and the lusciousness aspect. So then you have the emptiness of the physical body having all those same qualities, and those two kind of merging into one complete big cessation, which I would think that that's pretty close to the experience of having rainbow body. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking on this wonderful journey. Some very clear descriptions of your practice and your path and these insights that you've gained. A very nice perspective, I think, for everyone, just to show how different everyone's experiences are of this raw human experience that we're all going through. Maybe there's two main things that I get from this journey that you've taken us on. One of the biggest things was this realization that actually it's not just about me, it's about what this can do for everyone. And that little story of you with your daughter lying in bed at night, and you're there comforting her, and you're having these thoughts that, oh, isn't this a beautiful thing that I'm here selflessly, and it was those thoughts of bodhicitta that actually took you to this final insight of emptiness. And then I get a real sense of this feminine wisdom in you of surrender. This really sounded like what the final moments of your realization of emptiness were. It was even the surrender from the goal of emptiness, even surrendering from that. So the path seems to have been a kind of a progress of this surrender into the bodhicitta, a surrender to the devotion to the gurus and their compassion for you. Without surrendering to that, there's no feeling that compassion, and that compassion is a reflection of what's in all of us.
Yeah, and that's kind of and that's exactly as it's in all of us. That those are the aspects that are starting to come through more and more in my life and in my expression and in those feelings that I'm experiencing as making sense and being nourishing in a way for me, is when I'm acting and being aligned with expressing that bodhicitta, that compassion in my life.
Lovely. So thanks so much for taking your time. I think lots of people will benefit from your pearls of wisdom, and thank you very much. Until next time.
Thank you, Chris. It was a joy talking to you.